Welcome to Media Chats. I'm Xu Yawen in Beijing. The Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, or FOCAC, will take place from September 4th to 6th in Beijing. The theme of this year's forum is joining hands to advance modernization and build a high-level China-Africa community with a shared future. 4 high-level meetings will be held during the summit, including state governance, industrialization and agricultural modernization, peace and security, and high-quality Belt and Road Initiative cooperation. So what will be discussed during the forum? What do media professionals think of the summit and Sino-Africa relations? And what's China's role in promoting high-level industrialization in Africa? For more, let's bring in our panelists. Joining us in the studio is Gao Junya, a reporter and former correspondent with CGTN Radio in Zimbabwe. Also, Jainaba Sonko, she's the news presenter and reporter with QTV Gambia. And also with us on the line from Tanzania is Mary Kadoke. She's a reporter with the Guardian newspaper, and also Momodou Jallow. He's the presidential affairs reporter with GRTS, Gambia Radio and Television Services. Welcome all of you to the broadcast. So, Junya, let me come to you first. I know you were working as a foreign correspondent in Zimbabwe for like more than 5 years, right? Yes. You covered major events as well as interviewed presidents from Zimbabwe and also Botswana. So, how has that experience deepened your understanding of China-Africa relations as well as the significance of FOCAC?
Well, thank you for this opportunity. I think it was a great honor to have those opportunities to speak to the presidents of those 2 countries. Besides those 2 presidents, actually, I've got many opportunities to speak to different ministers and local people. I think those interviews and those exchanges just enlarge my vision. Let me know more about what Africa is like and what China-Africa cooperation is like. Well, I would say maybe I'm blessed that I would have those opportunities to interact with them and to work in Africa for such a long time. Mm-hmm. It's more than 5 years, although it's not enough for me. I think before I went there, I think Africa is a little bit far away. It took me 16 to 20 hours by flight, and I need to transit in Johannesburg to go to Harare. But although we have a long distance in terms of geography, but I think our heart is quite close to each other, because when I arrived there, I've met so many Chinese people. They've already started their business, their lives over there in Africa for, I should say, decades. And even there would be some Chinese dissidents, from the Qing dynasty. They've been there for centuries. So we actually have very close exchanges and contact with each other.
Exactly.
And I think this FOCAC mechanism is definitely bringing us closer.
Very well said. So Jay, how about you? I understand you are just here for over a week in Beijing. So how's your experience so far, and what will be your focus to cover the upcoming FOCAC? And also, what do you think will be high on the agenda during this year's forum?
I'm so glad to be here, and I totally agree with you about the fact that we might be far away from each other, the African continent and China, but we have that closeness and our hearts are together. It also took me about 20 hours to be here, from Gambia to Brussels and then from Brussels to Beijing, but I'm loving it so far. So when it comes to the specific areas that I'm looking forward to covering, it's climate change as well as trade. So it is climate change because I am an individual who's a climate change journalist, and I have environmental journalist rather, and I've been covering the COP, in Scotland as well as in Dubai. So I have that clear understanding of what climate change is all about. And then I'm aware of a joint declaration when it comes to China and Africa in combating climate change related matters. And this is going to emerge with the FOCAC 2024, these conversations will emerge about how China and the African continent can come together to ensure that developed countries will give them the climate financing that they deserve, considering the fact that Africa, for example, contributes little when it comes to emissions. And also moving on is trade. Trade is very important because we've seen a pledge that was made by China that is 300 billion US dollars in terms of investment in the African continent. That was not attainable due to several reasons, but I'm sure these conversations will also emerge during the FOCAC 2024 as to how China and Africa will be able to level the ground to ensure that this particular pledge is achieved. And when it is, it will be good for the African continent. It will also be good for China. So these are the two areas that I'm looking forward to covering during the FOCAC 2024. But on the sidelines as well, I would love to take a look at young people, you know, as a youth program host back in the Gambia, understanding some of the challenges that African youth go through. I would love to also know, you know, some of the pledges that will emerge and some of the initiatives that the African continent also has to put on the table for China to be able to partner or cooperate to ensure that the young people of China and the young people of the Gambia cooperate more to ensure that there's a better future for both.
Let me come to you, Momodou. You visited Beijing with a Gambian president in 2018 for the summit. So how has FOCA, changed China-Gambia bilateral relations since you visited?
Yes, that summit, which was attended by the president, our president, the Gambian president, His Excellency Adama Barrow, was indeed a watershed moment for our country, because we are just emerging from a very, very difficult period. We all knew the transition that the Gambia had to undergo. So at that critical time, the Gambia saw China as a major partner, and the FOCAC Summit Forum gave an opportunity for the continent, China, and in particular the Gambia, to engage with China. So within that framework, the Gambia was able to benefit immensely from Chinese support, because, as I've said, it was a very critical moment for the country, just coming out from a very, very difficult period, transition, the political impasse. So the Gambia was basically, on its knees. So it needed the support of partners, and the People's Republic of China, is one key element that was able to support the Gambia's development. So that meeting provided an opportunity for the Gambia and China to cooperate on all levels. So China rolled out a number of initiatives for the country, such as they funded through a grant the construction of 2 bridges along the River Gambia, and also the construction of a 50-kilometer road from Basse to Fatoro, which is in rural Gambia. This is seen as a very strategic investment under the FOCAC initiative that gave renewed impetus to the Gambia's socioeconomic and infrastructural development, and it laid the foundation for further collaboration between the two countries, because it is important to note that the Gambia and China had a break in diplomatic relations, which we are just restored prior to President Barrow coming to power. So therefore, the summit, the FOCAC summit in Beijing, was definitely, the foundation for renewed cooperation between the Gambia and China, and gave birth to this modern, this cooperation that currently has paid great dividends for the country in terms of infrastructure, in terms of education, in terms of agriculture, in terms of diplomacy. So building on this summit in 2024, the Gambia expects more from this summit to leverage on what China can offer Africa in terms of development, in terms of cooperation on a win-win situation.
Mary, I know your recent article, you said that China has provided critical strategic support to Africa when needed. And as Africa seeks to industrialize and create jobs for its young people, China is again playing a key role. How did you arrive at these insights? Could you elaborate more on that with examples from Tanzania?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. When you're talking about the China-Tanzania relations, it actually started way back during the Tanzania-Zambia railway construction project. The project that was actually cemented by our forefathers, that is Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere and the chairman Mao Zedong. So they're the two people that actually by then cemented these the two ties between China and Tanzania. And the Tazara project actually gave employment to the military officials by then. And from that time, now they came in so many initiatives that engaged Tanzania and China. And from that point now, we have young people, we have so many stakeholders coming in, like to gain from the cooperation in terms of employment and all that. So speaking about the two ties relations between China and Tanzania, we are actually highlighting from that particular time during the Tazara project.
Junya, let's zoom into China's investment in Africa. We know by the end of last year, Chinese investment in the continent surpassed the $40 billion, making it one of Africa's major sources of foreign investment. So were you surprised about the large amount of investment from China to Africa? And also, like, what are your observations on Chinese investment in Zimbabwe, where you were in the past, like from 2018 to 2023? How do local community think of China's presence there?
To be honest, I'm not surprised at all, because Africa is such a, let me say, maybe investment hub, for the whole world, because Africa has its own resources and Africa has this huge young population. Africa is this land of opportunities, I believe. Yes, when you were asking me about this investment project, I think Mary just mentioned one. This is time-honored railway, Tazara, because I think it's embedded in every Chinese head, and maybe Zambians and Tanzanians as well, because back in 1960s, this Tazara railway just linked Zambia to the outside world so that its copper, its other minerals can be exported to the outside world. Because at that time, a lot of African countries, they're still striving for independence, and no one was actually willing to help Zambia and Tanzania to build this railway. And then China came up and came upon with this proposal. And we know that a lot of people actually, they lost their lives over there. But this just witnessed our time-honored friendship. And in this new times, I think we've got many different investment, be it in education, in healthcare, in infrastructure, of course, a lot. Zimbabwe, of course, and Zimbabwe is not missing out. It's been grabbing the opportunities posed by China-Africa cooperation. And if I have to mention one, I would mention this new steel factory. It was built by a private Chinese company. I think they started building this in 2022, but the company was the factory was actually put into operation just this year. Why they took so long? Because this is a huge company, it's a huge factory, and it's a state-of-art infrastructure. And after its completion, Zimbabwe would have this opportunity to export to the outside world, and it would make steel to supply other countries. And also, steel factory is not about steel, right? It's a complicated value chain. There would be so many other enterprises, so many other industries thrive on such a cooperation and project. So I think that's something I would like to share and mention.
So Jay, we know poverty alleviation is one of the major issues hindering your country's overall development in the Gambia. So what are the main factors, do you think, contributing to this issue? How has the situation changed since the Gambia joined the FOCAC and also the Belt and Road Initiative?
Yeah, so I think one of the major issues causing poverty in Little Gambia is the fact that we do not have natural resources. This is a completely tax-based economy, depending solely on the tax that we collect, apart from the fishing industry, which is the River Gambia. So because of that, there's not a lot of factories and industries that we could actually tap into as a country or make something out of to be able to export to the outside world, to gather that wealth. So because of that, it is quite challenging, like you mentioned, when it comes to fighting poverty. But the narrative has changed. There was a 20-year break when it comes to bilateral relations between China and the Gambia. So the moment the resumption took place shortly when President Adama Barrow took over as president, we've seen a lot of changes. And one of the very major changes that I can point at is the construction of bridges. Because some of these rural communities did not have bridges, and it was affecting trade and investment in these areas. We're talking about roads here, the movements of goods and services, which as well through the Roads and Belt initiative, those changes are able to happen. So for me, it's about the trade, because like I said, a tax-based economy. If it's a tax-based economy, then you are trying to focus on goods and services to be able to get more tax, to be able to ensure that social protection systems are put in place for education, for health, for social security, and all of that. So the changes for me, I'll focus on the infrastructural development, which is the construction of the bridges and the roads, which are able to ensure the smooth movement of people and goods and services, to ensure that more money is generated and accumulated. We've also seen, when it comes to the health sector as well, Chinese doctors coming to the Gambia to help boost our very vulnerable and insufficient health sector. When it comes to education as well, a country's education system is okay if we have individuals in STEM, because with the engineering and other areas to be able to solve some of the societal problems that we are going through as a developing nation. So with scholarship packages, we're able to send Gambians to China to study different STEM areas. And when they do, they're able to go back to the Gambia and then build the country, in a STEM-related way, not the arts and sciences and all of that. They're important, but, in this day and age of technological advancement, it's more of the STEM areas to ensure sustainable development.
Yeah, that reminds me of, there's an old saying in China, if you want to get rich, build roads first. Yeah. Another thing is, if you want to teach someone to get independent, it's not giving them the fish, but also teach them how to fishing, so you can rely on your own.
I totally agree with that, and that is the dimension that Chinese government is using, because the roads are there. Now, when expansions take place, it's a matter of, depending on your own people, because now they've come here, they've had the technical know-how, and when they come back, they can take our own development into their own hands.
Yeah. Momodou, let me come to you. So the Chinese people also experienced extreme poverty in the past until recent years. In 2021, that's when China has lifted over 800 million people out of extreme poverty and is advancing towards modernization. So are there any examples, are there any experiences from China that you think the Gambia could perhaps adopt in its pursuit of modernization and prosperity?
Yes, of course, the Chinese model serves as a great example that other countries around the world could follow, particularly the Gambia. The fact that China was able to reach such a milestone within such a period of time, over the last 50 years or 70 years, China was a developing country. Just, it was struggling, particularly during the aftermath of the Second World War. China was completely, trying to stand on its feet. But within a short period of time, China was able to reach such a milestone to become the leader, in terms of development globally. Now, China is counted as one of the, fastest developing countries in the world, and is expected to overtake even the U.S., within a very short period of time, as far as development and modernization is concerned. Now, this, requires, close study by other countries, including the Gambia, on, how can they adopt the Chinese model? Because China was able to invest heavily in all sectors of its economy, in education, in infrastructure, in agriculture, in healthcare. So these are areas that the Gambia also needs to focus on to develop its human capital by training a lot of young people. Right now, as my colleague Jainaba has just said, there are a lot of Gambian young people studying in Chinese universities, in various areas, including in STEM, that is in skills, engineering, technology areas. These are important areas that could be replicated in the Gambia. They can come back to build the industrial base of the country. In terms of agriculture, the Gambia has a very, very fertile agricultural land that could be exploited all year round. But currently, the state of agriculture in the Gambia, leaves a lot of desire, which is basically on rain-fed. It is based on rainfall. So with such experiences, we have Chinese technicians right now in the Gambia. They are working in the Central River region, which is the rice breadbasket of the country, working with farmers, trying to, infuse new technologies on rice production and other crop production. We also have, Chinese technicians working, in the education sector, and in the healthcare sector, trying to build in technology. So these are areas that the Gambia needs to focus on, to improve its development and, enhance, poverty reduction, because that's the focus of the government of President Adama Barrow. That is, within a short period of time, the Gambians must be able to overcome, reduce poverty to an acceptable level. And the Chinese experience, the Chinese model serves as a great example that other countries such as the Gambia could emulate. So this is indeed a very, very interesting point that the Gambia can learn from. They can by working together with the Chinese, with the People's Republic of China in those areas that I've already mentioned, in agriculture, in healthcare, in education, and infrastructural development. This will serve as the basis for poverty alleviation in the Gambia.
Even though China has lifted its people out of poverty, it still doesn't want other countries to simply copy and paste this model to either developing countries or countries in the global south, because China wants each country to have their own path towards industrialization or modernization. So I think, but there are still lessons can be learned. Yeah, it's not like forcing.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that postulation that each individual country around the world has its own, knows what model fits for it. And China is one country that does not impose its system and its model on other countries. But nonetheless, there are important lessons that other countries could learn from China. How is China able to develop its agricultural sector, for instance? How is China able to develop its education sector? What are some of the areas that are needed for particular countries that they could tap from Chinese expertise in agriculture, in education, and in healthcare? These are important elements that countries like the Gambia could copy. But China still remains, it has been working with other countries, but it does not impose its model on other countries. And it allows for each individual country in its own unique way to pursue its development needs through support and also through cooperation and through partnership.
Yeah, so I just wanted to comment there. I'm so glad you talked about the copy and paste issue, and that Momodou is talking about the fact that there's nothing imposed on African countries when it comes to policies that China use to ensure that they build their system better. But I think now, then it comes back to us as African countries as to how active we are, how ready we are to make sure that our agenda is out there, the agenda that is unique to our own situations as African countries, to design policies in a way that best fits, African people, to ensure that the solutions are there. I'm not sure that is what we do quite often, because we just want to take a model that already exists and just want to lift it and use that in our context, which sometimes at the end of the day doesn't work.
Yes.
It's with different people, with different cultures and all of that. So then it takes us being proactive and sitting on the table and making the right decisions that actually favors our people. And sometimes I'm not sure we do that, unfortunately.
Mary, so let me come to you. We know in the past 3 years, Chinese companies have created over 1 million jobs in Africa in agriculture, processing, manufacturing, and trade logistics. How have local businesses and communities responded to those jobs created by Chinese investments? And have you observed some new, jobs created by Chinese companies in the past?
So infrastructure part has always been the focus of China when it comes to cooperating with Tanzania. And coming to investments, we see the Chinese companies investing into the agriculture sector, the health sector, and surprisingly, we also have investors who are joining in the film industry. So a few sectors to mention, you can actually tell that the Chinese are really dedicated into investing in Tanzania. And initially, we also had a forum, the FOCAC warm-up meeting that engaged the Chinese stakeholders and the government. And the government actually talked of rooting into making sure that it engages the Chinese investors into the agriculture sector and in industrialization. And one of the highlights that the government said was that among the investors who are taking an opportunity in Tanzania, China is actually taking the lead. More on that, we also had the Tanzania Investment Center saying that with all the 10 top 10 foreign investors in Tanzania, China is taking the lead with 11.5 USD billion. So you can actually tell that with this initiative that China and Tanzania are taking, actually not benefiting the government, but on the other hand, the citizens are also benefiting in terms of employment opportunities.
Junya, let me come to you. So as actually Jay just mentioned, she's covering the climate change, and actually if we look at the reports and the data, Chinese companies have launched many clean energy projects in Africa in the past few years, including a significant increase in exports of lithium batteries and photovoltaic products. Like, what factors are behind the surge in trade between China and Africa in the new energy sectors, based on your observation?
Yeah, I think let me start by my experience in Zimbabwe, because in my last year staying in Zimbabwe, we've been suffering from frequent power cuts. It's happening a lot because a lot of African countries, Zimbabwe included, does not have enough energy supply.
Yeah.
So of course they have to diversify their energy mix. And green energy, so be it solar, be it wind, be it geothermal, that would be very important to their own energy mix. That's one point. And also hydropower stations. And on the other hand, I think because I think we're all striving for this sustainable development, right? And green is definitely the future, is the future path for all of us. And China has this technology, this products, and Africa has this resources and has this demand. Of course, we have plenty to explore on this side. And also, I think Africa is also a victim of climate change, like what Jane is focused on, because climate change is impacting all of us, and it is happening. And going green is definitely, quite urgent actually for all of us. And also, I think those fuels, on the other hand, I think for African countries, they're quite expensive for people to afford.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, green is achievable because African countries has plenty of solar energies. They have vast minerals like to make lithium batteries. So I think this is what is happening, I think, and this is also the right path.
Jay, do you have anything to add? What do you make of Junya's points, and also like what challenges and opportunities do you think are facing by China-Africa cooperation in clean energy, new energy sector? How can the going green, the green transition of the continent can help to boost Africa's, high-level industrialization?
Yeah, I think your points were really valid when it comes to this topic because, for example, Gambia contributes 0.01% of global emissions. And we actually get to carry the burden of the effects of climate change when it comes to drought, flooding, and other harmful issues that are posed by climate change. And like you mentioned, greening or transitioning to renewable energy is actually the future because that is what is sustainable for African countries, especially for an African country like the Gambia where we do not have any natural resources and has a potential of solar, wind and river that can be used. So it's a matter of learning from China where the technical expertise is already to ensure that we are able to have a smooth transitioning but also it is important that we focus on the knowledge transfer. You know, I delved into this, the technical know-how aspect, to ensure that the transitioning from fossil fuels to renewable energy is actually sustainable. Because then if we have, you know, the Chinese keep coming over constantly, where the required knowledge transfer is not also done with the local individuals, like I said, to for the whole process to continue, then it's not going to be a quite sustainable act. And based on my research, I've been able to understand that there have been limited transfer of knowledge when it comes to this renewable energy. But you know, in another paper that has been done, I've also seen how China's president has also pledged, you know, different skill centers and areas where African people can actually be trained when it comes to these areas, just so that there's this continuity that I'm talking about, because the gaps have been there. So basically, it's just about the fact that the African continent has huge potential. Now it's a matter of the required skill transfer, which China is already spearheading to ensure that we have a sustainable transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy.
So Mary, we know building high-quality Belt and Road Initiative cooperation remains one of the important subjects to be discussed during this FOCAC. China announced its BRI like over a decade ago, and since then more than 50 African countries have become participants in this initiative. So how are BRI projects shaping the infrastructure of Tanzania and also the broader region, and promoting industrial upgrading, as well as under the Green BRI, as both Junya and Jay mentioned, what has been achieved?
Speaking of Belt and Road Initiative in Tanzania, Tanzania has actually benefited a lot from it. And a few projects to mention, you actually talk of the Ubungo Interchange project, the project that the Chinese government have actually put in March just to make sure that this comes into a reality. And we also have the Kigongo Busisi Bridge, a bridge that the Chinese government is actually putting a lot just to make sure that it comes to a reality. The project has actually clocked 90% to its completion. So you also actually tell that there's a lot that's actually being done between the two countries just to make sure that the BRI comes into reality. For instance, if I remember that last year I had an opportunity to have an interview with the China Civil Engineering Construction Corporation, and they actually pledged to like complete all the state projects with Tanzania in terms of BRI. So with these agreements and something that we can actually see and testify that the BRI comes into reality, Tanzania has actually benefited a lot from it.
When we're talking about, you know, infrastructure development or industrialization, most of the time they don't think it's aligned with sustainable development. But I think under the BRI or under the FOCAC, people can actually pay more attention to, as we just discussed, the green development of the continent and while developing its economy. So, Junya, some have suggested while FOCAC has emerged as a unique form, is still by and large shaped by a donor-recipient dynamic. And in the meantime, African countries mostly take a back seat, while China initiates much of the agenda. What's your thoughts on that?
I think this is definitely a misconception or a false accusation, because I think China-Africa cooperation is for mutual benefit and win-win cooperation. It is bilateral. When it comes to bilateral ties, when it comes to bilateral cooperation, it's not like the one is dominating and kind of like putting out all the commands and demanding the other side to have certain, to provide certain conditions. You know, when it comes to China-Africa cooperation, they have to discuss like what kind of projects, what kind of things they need, you know, for the two sides to further deepen their ties. And also, I think one thing I'd like to point out is like we talk a lot about China's investment in Africa. Actually, Africa is also investing in China. You know, South Africa is investing big, investing huge here in China. And also, we know that I think you've heard of those schools donated by African countries like the Republic of Congo, the Equatorial Guinea. They've been helping China also, those earthquake-hit areas when they were suffering, when people were suffering. Our African brothers and sisters, they are there to help us. When it comes to this whole dialogue and this whole forum on China-Africa cooperation, we come on an equal foot, and we're going to discuss what we need, what we can provide.
I might not agree with you slightly. Not because it's not based on a win-win situation. It is based on a win-win situation. It's totally a level playing field for both the African continent and China. But in this instant, for example, China has the China-Africa Cooperation Vision. They have a clear vision. I see China has a clear vision when we are on the table with China and Africa, having conversations and, you know, looking forward to what to do. I do not see a clear vision as clear coming from the African continent. I don't know if you're getting what I'm saying.
Yes. Maybe,
like
too many countries. It's
even
kind
if
of challenging to
that
come
is
up
true.
with one
But
voice.
even if it's too many countries, I would expect different African regions based on the same problems or challenges that they're facing to come together to say, okay, this is West Africa, for instance. It's 16 countries. They have common challenges. They can come up with a vision. You know, we can have East African countries come up with a vision because they also have similar challenges. Central African countries can also come up with a vision because they have similar challenges. Personally, the problem is not China here. China has ensured that it's level, it's a win-win situation. But now it goes back to an African like myself who should have a clear vision as well to put on the table ahead of the FOCAC. For example, am I going to see the African continent, even if they have to divide themselves according to regions, to come with a clear motive? Because you don't want it to be scanty. And I've not been seeing that, which is not China's fault. But I guess we just have to put our house in order better to be able to put on the table what we want to see, what we want to achieve within a period and all of that. That's what I believe in.
And
what do you think?
I think it's going to happen because Jane, you've pointed out this problem, right? So I think this is a certain voice for
that's what media is supposed to do, like pointing out the problem, maybe come up with certain possible solutions and have policymakers and decision makers, you know, come up with the draft plan and push forward to make it eventually happen.
I'm looking forward to a clear vision. Let me just put it that way.
Momodou, so we have noticed another common misunderstanding about China-Africa trade and cooperation is the debt issue. I mean, there were accusations that China was creating a so-called debt trap for African countries. However, like according to a recent IMF report, Sino-African bilateral debt constitutes only 11% of Africa's total external debt, while commercial bonds and multilateral debt accounts for 66%. Moreover, China has never attached any political conditions to those collaborations. So what are your thoughts when coming to this kind of accusations and also the debt issue?
Well, I think these are just peddled by detractors of China-Africa cooperation. Because China, unlike other blocs or unlike other institutions, financial institutions and other powers, does not attach any conditions in its dealings with African countries in terms of development or financing or debt. And if you look at it recently, some countries that have benefited from IMF or World Bank loans, it has backfired. We've seen crisis in some African countries, such as in Kenya, and other African countries, where the debt burden from Western countries is no more sustainable. But these accusations are usually leveled by the detractors who detest China-Africa engagement, because we've seen China's engagement in Africa has been very beneficial. for both countries, because it is anchored on the principle of win-win situations, and also respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of each other. China does not interfere in the internal affairs of the country. It does not attach strings when it gives loans or debt to other countries. So it has given some kind of a leverage to these countries, for African countries to access Chinese financing. And as such, many of these countries are going forward, engaging with China to get funding. If you look at the Gambia, for instance, in 2018, China forgave some of the debt that the Gambia owed to China. That is a very positive development. And since then, too, we have seen the two countries engage, and China currently is financing some projects in the Gambia, particularly in the energy sector, renewable energy. And a plant in Jambur, which is one of the biggest in the country, was recently inaugurated, and a Chinese company constructed the plant. So China and the Gambia, for instance, have engaged in several areas of cooperation, including financing. So also has it been with other countries on the African continent, which has paid dividends. So it is up to these African countries to identify areas of cooperation where they would want Chinese financing, and China only gives out, honors these agreements based on the based on the wishes of these individual countries. So if you look at it, this idea of a death trap, I think, is just being peddled by detractors who fear or who do not want China-Africa engagement on a more enhanced level. Or Africa should not pay much attention to these claims, but rather continue on this trajectory of development, because Africa also needs that. It needs also alternative forms of funding. It does not have to depend on the mainstream Western financial institutions, which have been exploiting Africa for far too long. So China provides an alternative for African countries to access financing to enhance development projects, to fund development projects that have had a lot of impact, positive impact, on the lives and livelihoods of Africans and the people in African countries.
Junya, if we look into the future, I mean, China has committed on deepening cooperation with Africa on industrial and supply chains. How do you foresee China's role in advancing high-level industrialization in Africa?
Definitely, this role is going to get bigger. I think just like Momodou said, like China 30 or 40 years ago, even half a century ago, China is not what it's like now. And I've been talking to different African officials. When I asked them about their experience, like their first-hand experience about China, they would mention this huge transformation China has underwent over the years. So I think China has the experience. China and Africa, we're from the global south, the global majority, and we have our common interest, common aspirations. China definitely has a lot to share when it comes to the industrialization of Africa. And also, I think besides those, technology and expertise, and China has also this capacity to share and so that China and Africa can work together and to achieve their own different paths of modernization.
Jay, how about you? How do you assess China's role in Africa to help the continent to achieve its high-level modernization and industrialization?
Yeah, I think it's huge, China's stake in this to support the African continent. Because like you said, China has been in the position of developing countries like the Gambia at a point in time. So they understand what it means to be on the low, and then you have to develop to higher heights when it comes to technology, education, agriculture, infrastructural development, and the others. The technical know-how is already there, and we've seen the significant strides that China is making to ensure that there's that knowledge transfer, supporting with infrastructural development, agriculture, for example, in the Gambia, they're working on having all these resistant varieties of rice, and rice is one of the staple foods in the Gambia. Food self-sufficiency is also very important when it comes to sustainable development. We've seen those kinds of areas. We've also seen the areas of governance where China has supported the Gambia government with the parliament. 1/3 of the Gambia's parliament has visited China on case studies and improvement of governance practices and all of those things. So the process is already ongoing. It's not like it hasn't started yet.
Yeah.
It's already ongoing. So it's just now a matter of how, at the receiving end, we're willing to receive and keep, and then China obviously is doing what it's supposed to do with sharing. So let's see what the future holds for the African continent when it comes to industrialization and modernization.
Momodou, how will FOCAC Summit help to promote the China-Gambia relationship to the next level? And also your take on the two latest remarks.
Yes, China-Africa relations holds great prospects for the future. Both the two sides, there's China on the one hand and Africa on the other hand, have great potentials. Africa is the new frontier as far as investment is concerned. It is, right now, globally, many of the great powers are looking towards to engage Africa. So therefore, China stands at a very, very pivotal point as far as its relations with Africa is concerned. It has the, China is more or less the global leader, in the next few years, as I've said earlier, the next decade or so, China will emerge as the, as the greatest power in the world, with so much potential for development and investment. And already, China is not resting on its laurels. Its engagement in Africa is growing, and as attested to by this FOCAC forum. Now, this forum, there a lot of expectation on how China and Africa can work together to move the agenda of cooperation forward in various areas, as I've said, in investment, in trade, in technology transfer, in education, and so forth. So therefore, both sides, China on the one hand and Africa on the other hand, should continue to work together to identify areas of potential, cooperation to benefit, for the mutual benefit of the two sides. So China should continue on this path of development and engagement with the rest of the world, and particularly with Africa, on this BRI, that is the Belt Road Initiative, which has the potential to transform the entire world into a global village, a fully modernized and developed world.
Lastly, Mary, let me come into you. We know this year marks the 60th anniversary of diplomatic ties between China and Tanzania. So what are your expectations for future Sino-Tanzania and Sino-Africa cooperation?
Well, just like what you say, that this year marks the 60th anniversary of Tanzania and China bilateral ties, and there is a lot actually in the bucket list to tell on what China and Tanzania have achieved from their cooperation. We'll talk of the military cooperation, we'll talk of the political cooperation, we'll talk of the investment area. So there are a lot in the bucket list. We will not finish actually mentioning all of it. But with the cooperation that Tanzania has actually cemented with China, you'll actually tell that the cooperation remains strong, and we are looking forward to achieving a lot from this particular cooperation in the future.
Well, with that, we're wrapping up this episode of Media Chats. Many thanks to our panelists, Gao Junya, a reporter and former correspondent with CGTN Radio in Zimbabwe, and Jainaba Sonko. She's the news presenter and reporter with QTV Gambia. With us on the line from Tanzania is Mary Kadoke. She's a reporter with the Guardian newspaper, as well as Momodou Jallow. He's the presidential affairs reporter with Gambia Radio and Television Services. Thank you so much again for joining us. Bye for now.